Inshallah, today we are going to discuss about this nucleic acid structure and DNA replication. So we move on. If you see this slide, you can have a general idea. The first thing comes to our mind when we talk about DNA, that there is something evolution. Some of the ideas come to our mind. There is the evolution and DNA is involved. DNA is involved, maybe in the dinosaur, maybe the current human perspective. Yes, scientifically, there are a lot of evidences which people have studied as per their limitation and sources. But religiously, for sure, we cannot deny the fact that the God is the creator of everything, and every species, every genus has been created by God. So there are two different perspectives. One is the Islamic perspective or religious perspective in all religion versus the scientific perspective. Many of the time they don't match because religion is 24 hours way of passing life, but this is just a knowledge. So remember, don't confuse both the things together. So there is no basically link of evolution directly with the organism, but maybe with the environment and other perspective there is a link. Today our learning outcome is listed here in the slide. You already have these all learning outcomes in your course book. Well, have you ever thought if all of you are having, instead of having a university ID, if you have a DNA ID? Do you think it is possible? I'm sorry, it's very, very strange for me because normally I take a class which is very interactive. So seems like, teaching this kind of lecture with with current platform is a bit different. So I hope you can all follow me, inshallah, and you can attain the basic conceptual knowledge. So imagine if we all have one DNA ID, and this DNA ID we can go anywhere in the world. We don't need any student card. We don't need any my card. Only we have DNA ID which can be used anywhere in the world. But still now, even with all these current perspectives, lot of technology. Remember, since 2000, it was a knowledge. It was an era of knowledge. But now, after 2000, it's the era of technology. When you change the technology, you see the same histological sections under the light microscope, the knowledge will be different and the results will be different. But you see the same thing under the electron microscope, the results and everything that you're going to see will be different. So changing the technology is changing the knowledge now. So, but currently we are unable to even perform this small kind of DNA ID till now in the world. It seems too complicated with the current technologies. So what are nucleic acids? Nucleic acids are macrobiomolecules. They're the polymers of nucleotides. They are produced by two pathways. I'm going to add in your CALIP two CLAs, two assignments, and I want you to give me a very small briefing, maybe one paragraph answer to those two questions. So they're produced by two pathways. What are those pathways? It will be one of your assignment. So they are polyprotic acid. What is polyprotic? Polyprotic means protic is basically coming from the protein. Side, we do have the mitochondrial DNA. In the mitochondrial DNA, we have total of 36 to 38 genes which are reported. So there is a serious low role of mitochondrial DNA in our pathogenesis, in our health. We will discuss in some other lecture. But you need to know that they're located in the nucleus and nucleus in the form of chromosomes and in the mitochondria as a mitochondrial DNA within the cytosol. So now in the plants, we have the chloroplast, the ring shape chloroplast. So in plants, the DNA is located in the form also of the chloroplast DNA, and in bacteria, we have the plasmid DNA. So don't mix the mitochondrial DNA with the plasmid or chloroplast DNA, which is not present in the humans. Well, these are the 23 pairs of human chromosomes, which are basically altogether 46 chromosomes. You can see all the sizes of all these chromosomes, which are made up of DNA, And if you see the X and Y chromosome, they are actually one pair, chromosome 22, 21, 20, 19, 18. So you can see all of these chromosomes. The chromosome 1 and 2 are the longest and the largest chromosomes in human genome. What is genome? The term genome is used. It's a collection of all the DNA, whatever is a mitochondrial nucleus, all together it's called genome. So total genetic makeup of a human or any other organism is called a genome. Okay, now based on our chromosomal DNA, we have discussed about the chromosomal DNA and we have discussed about the mitochondrial DNA. Now we have two things. The first one is on the left side, the white shirt we are presenting is a maternity testing starting with M. And on the right side, you got the paternity testing. Okay, now always remember the mitochondrial DNA is very, very special. Why it is special? Because mitochondrial DNA is always inherited only from your mothers, from your mama, not from your papa. Okay, so that is something very special about the mitochondrial DNA. So based on the mitochondrial DNA, for example, in forensic sciences, or somebody got an accident, or you want to identify the child is belonging to which parent, so we have different tests. For example, now we have basically a maternal testing, or we have the paternity testing. In the maternity testing, we focus using the mitochondrial DNA. When we talk about the paternity testing, we majority of the cases we use the basically the chromosomal DNA, the nuclear DNA. So that is the difference. We have the maternity, we have the paternity. So they are two different basically terms which will be used in the genetics. So you have been very assured about something about the central dogma, which is basically on your left side. So if you see here all together, let me try to. So this whole part you have already basically studied in your previous classes, which is the genome will give you a transcriptome, and transcriptome will give you a proteome. So on the right side, you'll see actually the same thing in the same form here. DNA will give rise to messenger RNA, and messenger RNA give rise to protein. Up now, the new part is with the technology advancement, we found that the RNA, for example, is not of one type. We have the tRNA, we have the rRNA, we have mRNA, and there's so many subtypes. So what we are coming ahead now with a new term, basically a new central dogma, which has been changed to something, to this new one, the yellow one. That is the DNA will give rise to tRNA, mRNA, RNA, and then it give rise to proteins. Well, now the issue currently has been like, we have been discussing all together in something which is out of the box, which we have not known. This example, the specific part DNA to tRNA, mRNA, RNA, and protein. So what we are heading now, previously we had the concept till the proteomes, that is the genome, like all the genes they give to transcriptome, which is all the RNAs, and they give rise to proteome, like all the proteins. So what we have 23 pair of chromosomes with approximately 25,000 genes, and they give you a total of nearly 100,000 proteins in your body, which could be enzymes, which could be structural proteins, which could be functional proteins, so all these things all together give you a total of 2500 metabolites. So these metabolites are performing different functions in your body. So and our body need all of these metabolites. So now current era, we are now not just discussing about the genome, transcriptome, proteome, but we are now in the metabolomic era in which we are targeting metabolome. I feel till the time you will be graduating, I hope instead of treating the patients, we will be treating the genes and proteins, which has been actually started in other parts of the world. So maybe a patient coming to you with a specific sign and symptoms, maybe you are actually targeting a specific gene to recover all those specific sign and symptoms, rather than giving a generalized traditional way of approach, which is normally used in the clinic. So it's going to complement our lot of scenarios, diagnosis, prognosis, but this is where we are heading. We are going to treat the genes and proteins, inshallah, a very, very near future. So this is something very amazing, which I want all of you to understand. Are you all okay? Can you all listen to me? Can you all follow me?
Yes, Prof.
Okay. So this is something very amazing. Remember, we assume that in our body we have lot of nucleic acids. Can you go to the last part? If you see the last part down there, just give me 1 minute. Let me try to this part. So if you go down this part, if you see here the viroids, the viral particles, for example, they have a size of 2000 to 5000 base pair. Kb is basically kilo base pair. The 2000 to 5000 kilo base pair. Then you have the bacteria size 28,000 kilo base pair. And somewhere here you got the humans. If you see the humans are here. So in the humans, it's nearly 3080 MB. MB is multiplied by 1000. 3080 multiplied by 1000. Sorry, at 100,000 basically. So if you see here, humans versus amoeba. So if you something very strange, amoeba is a unicellular organism and like it's not complex. The humans are so complex organism with well organized, the structure of the life. But interestingly, the genome size of amoeba is basically much higher than the human actually. So if you compare human size now further with any other species, for example, in the middle you got this plant here, sorry, this flower here, basically the Paris japonica. So it is even higher than amoeba and human. So what we are trying to say, very important part, this is basically a slide taken from one of the evolutionary network. So if you see here, the microbes were present 4 billion years ago. Then we got visible organisms, which is multicellular. Then you got the eukaryotes coming in with the mitochondria. Then you got the multicellular eukaryotes coming in. So then this is how the timeline goes with the size of the genome. So the whole summary of this slide is the size of the genome. Again, please listen to me. The size of the genome is not a reflection of the body complexity. So if we assume if somebody is having a big body like elephant, it means the elephant is going to have a very huge amount of DNA. No, it is not the accurate answer. We have a very good example, human versus amoeba, for example. So the complexity of the organization of the body is not a character of the genome size of the of that organism. So please keep this thing in mind, inshallah, in the future. So we move on to the next slide. This is how the DNA is arranged in human chromosome. So we got a chromosome here basically, and this chromosome is what we call well organized. So within these chromosomes, all the DNA is arranged in the form of different threads. So these threads, when they're coming out, if you see here, these threads are basically encircled, or they are basically bound to specific proteins, which are called histone proteins. So like this is a group of proteins, 8 proteins total, and they like a beads, like small beads, like a tasbih, so they are like beads, and the DNA is encircled around these beads. So this is how the DNA is arranged within the chromosome. And then we go further to the specific size of to the specific structure of the DNA. The DNA is something, a double helix. You can see here it's a double helix. It's a double helix in which there are different base pairs. So we're going to study about those base pairs in a short while. So this is how the DNA is arranged. So it's basically a chromosome. Within the chromosome, we have the nucleosomes, which are basically, nucleosome is a group of specific histone proteins. And the DNA is basically, like having a twist around those beads, like a thread is around specific ball or something. So then we got when we unwind them, then basically we found it's a double-stranded DNA. So this is how the DNA is organized in the human body. Okay, well, we go to the structure of the nucleotides. In nucleic acid, we have the nucleotide plus nucleotide plus nucleotide. So nucleic acid is basically made of lot of nucleotides, or it's a polynucleotide chain. Okay, remember this part. It's a polynucleotide chain. And within the nucleotide, we have a nucleoside and the phosphate group. Within the nucleotide, we have the nucleoside and the phosphate group. And what is now nucleoside? Nucleoside is the deoxyribose plus a nitrogenous base. So there are three things. There the we have the deoxyribose, we have the nitrogenous base, which comprise a nucleoside. And the third thing is the phosphate group. So altogether, three of these things, they come together to make a nucleotide. But for nucleoside, for RNA, we don't have the deoxyribose, we have the ribose sugar. And this ribose sugar is the reason why RNA is different from DNA. Well, okay, so we move on to the next slide. This is how the DNA is. This is the nucleoside. we have the nitrogenous base and we have the ribose or deoxyribose sugar. So it comprises the nucleoside. And then bringing in the phosphate group, it will become a nucleotide. So remember this structure. We are going to go through this structure might few times in the next few days. And now this whole thing is there are two classes of nitrogenous bases. We have the pyrimidines and purines. Firstly, we discuss about, we'll go back to the previous slide. We discuss about what is a nucleotide. Then we discuss about what is a nucleoside. Now we're discussing a specific only one part, which is basically the nucleoside here. This part we are discussing now, that these nitrogenous bases are of two types. The first type is basically we called pyrimidine, and the other side is the purines. Okay, now the tricky part is if you see the spellings here, pyrimidines is a longer word. Remember, the longer word is having the shorter size. Longer word pyrimidine is smaller, but the smaller word purine is bigger in ring structure. So they're opposite to each other. Pyrimidine ring is a longer word, but the structure is a smaller one. Purine is a small word, but the structure is a double pyral ring. So there are two rings. This is one ring. So that is the main difference between both of them. Okay, now we move on for the next part, which is pyrimidines include basically three different nitrogenous bases, inclusive of cytosine, uracil, and thymine. So these are three pyrimidines which are inclusive: cytosine, uracil, and thymine. But on the other side, in purines, we have adenine and guanine. Please, you don't need to go through all these structures. This is only to explain you. Please remember the conceptual knowledge. You don't need to learn all these structures which have been mentioned here. But yes, if you learn them, it could be very, very helpful for you, especially maybe during your pharmacology lectures. But for biochemistry, you can just go through the structure as per what we discussed, but maybe could be not that important from maybe any kind of assessment from all of you in quiz or any other thing. So we move on to the purines. Purines include two different nitrogenous bases. So it's adenine and guanine. Please, this one you have to change it to is by mistake. So this is adenine versus then the right side is basically the guanine. Now we move on to the next part, which is the pentose. We discussed the first part, which is the nitrogenous bases. Second part was the pentose. In the pentose, we have the D-ribose in RNA, which is and in DNA we have the 2-deoxy-D-ribose. Remember that we have the ribose ring, we have the furan ring, and the glucose structure, all those kind of things. So the difference is 2OH versus 2H. So this 2OH is present in deoxyribose. In ribose, there will be 2H. There will be lesser OH actually. This difference affects secondary structure and stability. Because remember, the DNA and the proteins, all these things, they have their primary, secondary, tertiary structures. So these all small differences affect those structures basically. So if you see here, so looking at these 2 points, they are both same. If you look at these 2 points, carbon number 2, just look at the carbon number 2, it's a OH and there is a H here. And the same thing has been repeated in the ring structure, in the furanose form on the right side. So there is a OH and there is a H here. So this is something very important to understand. The difference between the DNA and RNA is because of the deoxyribose or ribose sugar. Now we're coming to the chemical bonding of nucleoside. How a nitrogenous base is linked to the pentose sugar. Base is linked by a glycosidic bond. The carbon of the glycosidic bond is anomeric. Anomeric means where the central which can link to so many atoms at one time. Sugar make nucleoside, or you can put in a way a carbon atom on which the orientation of the bond can be any side, on the right side, or you remember we have the D glucose, L glucose. So they are all based on the anomeric carbon. Remember this part, they're based on the anomeric carbon. So sugar make nucleosides more water soluble than free bases. Could have a syn or anti-isomeric form. We'll discuss what is syn or anti-isomeric form. Okay, now if you see here, these two bonds, I want all of you to focus on these two bonds. The first bond is here and the second bond is here. So this is basically the glycosidic bond, and the same bond has been repeating in all of them basically. So this is how the glycosidic bond comes in, and it can connect your the nitrogenous bases with your a sugar molecule. But now we move on to the next part. This molecule, this specific bond is a reason of the orientation also. What it means? It means that, for example, in the first case, this could be on either will revert to this direction, or maybe it can be revert to the opposite direction. It can still keep moving on. So that is something very different about the DNA. So we move on to this. Right now, here you see we have the syn form. So syn form is on the left side for the guanosine, and on the right side you have the anti-guanosine. So this is the orientation which is moving from moving this bond from left to right. So this is how this is a kind of isomerism inside the nitrogenous bases. Okay, now this is the we talk about the phosphate group, and then we have the phosphate group which is attached to all of these all nucleosides basically. So this is always at carbon number 4 basically, or carbon number 5 basically, with basically phosphodiester bonding. So we have at the carbon number 5 we have the phosphodiester bonding, and carbon number 3 we have another phosphodiester bonding which will move on, which will make the chain of the whole DNA. And on the first carbon, we normally have the nitrogenous base. So now functional nucleic acid nucleotides provide recognition sequence for amino acid. Remember, for the amino acids to be formed, or the protein to be formed, you need a specific DNA sequence which will give you the messenger RNA. And from there, the proteins or amino acid sequence will be formed. Number 2, it is involved in cell signaling. What is cell signaling? It is just like, like you have the hormones, and hormones affect the whole body by their action through their signaling. Similarly, the DNA can also act like a signaling molecule, and it can affect a lot of things to occur inside the human body. Involves in cell division and metabolism. This is very straightforward. I think all of you know this thing. Number 4, ATP is a central to energy metabolism. Yes, now we know after going through this module, we know what is ATP. GTP drives protein synthesis. CTP drives lipid synthesis, and UTP drives carbohydrate metabolism. Now these 4, 5th, and 6th, 7 points, 4, 5th, 6th, and 7 points, please remember. If you remember this point, you will become very good in citric acid cycle. Remember, we have all the steps of citric acid cycle, in which we said it is basically involved in different pathways later. So now you know if it is ATP, where it will be involved. GTP will be involved in protein synthesis. The step which is having CTP will be involved in the lipid synthesis. UTP will be helpful in driving carbohydrate metabolism. Okay, now this is how the DNA polynucleotide chain is. I want you to focus on the lower picture. If you see here, this is, for example, the deoxyribonucleic acid on one side. We have the deoxyribonucleic acid on one side, and we do have the ribonucleic acid on the other side. So if you see here, the entirely how the chain is, we have a bond here, which is carbon number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th carbon. So the phosphate is at carbon number 5th, and then the same phosphate to make a chain will again come at carbon number 3. So it's a 5 and 3. Again here, we have the 5th, and then we got a 3. And then again, it got a 5th, and then we got a 3 carbon. So this is how the entire polynucleotide chain moves through using the phosphodiester bonding with the ribose or deoxyribose part. And then again, you can see the nitrogenous bases on the right side. So when it's a double-stranded DNA, on the opposite side, another chain similarly will come on this side, and it will link to the nitrogenous bases. So it will be linked to all the nitrogenous bases through specific, and then the other part of the chain will be on the other side. Means it will be having a, here you're going to get what we call the sugar molecule, and then the next part you will be getting a nitrogenous, the phosphate group. And again, this whole chain will be constructed similarly. So this is how the polynucleotide chain is synthesis. Okay, now remember normally when we represent our DNA in our experiments, in our lab, whenever we're doing experiment, we mention using an arrow line. So we put on the left side of the arrow, we put 5 prime. We called it 5 prime. 5 with a small dash up there, we called 5 prime, and we called 3 prime. Okay, now this 5 prime end is basically your phosphate group. Means on this side you got a phosphate group. So this is where your basically chain is finishing. On the right side, you got basically your 3 phosphate group, which is basically the ribose ending. So this is how the chain moves on. Similarly, when we are going to change this DNA into RNA, this will be basically the N terminal and this will be the C terminal of the protein. So this is maybe too advanced for you. This the last part I've told you about this arrow. But just if you see anywhere in the books you are reading, if you find this part, don't get confused. So that's why I need to highlight this whole part. Okay, now this is we move on to the next part because we said the DNA is double-stranded. So if it is 5 to 3 prime, we have to the first strand will be called the sense strand, leading strand, direct strand, positive strand, or coding strand. These are all the same name of one DNA strand. Again, sense, leading, direct, positive, or coding strand or plus strand. And it is normally from 5 to 3 prime direction. 5 to 3 prime direction means phosphate group on the left side, and right side will be your ribose group. But on the other side, if you see the antisense will be always complementary to the sense strand. It's called antisense leading strand, not leading, leading strand, indirect strand, negative strand, or template strand. So it will be opposite into 5 to 3 prime direction. So this is how the DNA looks like. So here down there you can see these two 5 3 2 these two of the strand, they are merged together. This whole part is merged together. If you see here, the 3 prime and 5 prime, they're opposite to each other. So it's a kind of double helix going on. So similarly, so this is a kind of double helix going on, and you can see the 3 prime and 5 prime ends. And when they are going to give you basically the codons, this is how you're going to get the codons out of them, which will be amino acid. So these are different amino acids which you're getting out of it. For example, if the sequence is CTT, it gives you a specific amino acid. Example, if it's CAT sequence is there, it gives you tyrosine. If it's TCG is there, it will give you alanine. So three codon, three sequences of the nitrogenous bases give you one amino acid sequence. So that is the reason even we have only 4 ATGC, four of them only there. Tapi they have a lot of coding sequence. When you multiply with them each other, they get so many combinations. Nearly 60 plus combination you got, and from these 60 plus combination, all of them they give you my maximum of 20 to 24 different amino acids. And these 4 different amino acids with different combination, they give rise to different kind of proteins in our body. So now base pairing and DNA double helix, always remember we have the similar sequence. Similar sequence means example ATGC is one sequence and the opposite one will be ATGC. You need to know what is the difference between similar and complementary sequence. So similar is ATGC versus ATGC. This is similar, but if it is ATGC versus A opposite to T, example we have ATGC and then we have TACG. So they are complementary to each other. Remember, the A always complement or A always bind with T and C always bind with G. So this is called complementary sequences. Okay, base pair arise from the hydrogen bond. Remember, we said we'll go back to this slide, previous slide. So we just mentioned somewhere, for example, the double-stranded DNA. Okay, for example, here the DNA strands, they bind to each other through the hydrogen bonds between two chains. So we have the first chain, again we have the first chain. In the first chain we have the phosphodiester bonding, which is giving you the whole chain, and then you have ribose sugar. Ribose sugar is bind to the nitrogenous base. On the other side you're getting another row in the same sequence, but these nitrogenous bases, they attract each other and they bind to each other through hydrogen bonds. So Erwin Chargaff had the pairing data but did not understand its application. Later, these are some scientists. Rosalind Franklin did an X-ray diffraction grating data, and then Francis Crick actually knew it's a double helix. But James Watson was the one who said it's basically H bonds, which is giving these all structural characteristic of double bond, these all helix and linking between the base pairing. So this is something again that we are just showing you. Basically, this is one of the. This is basically one of the strand of the DNA. This is a second. This is a leading strand. Is the leading strand, and here we explain everything how actually the base pairing happen. A always bind to T with double strand. C always bind with G with the triple strand. So this is how the two chains they move together actually. It's the same thing. I think please just leave this slide because it's too complicated. It would be okay for the postgraduates. Just leave this slide. Okay, now we go talk about the DNA sequencing and their nomenclature. International Union of Pure and Applied Chemistry proposed it, and International Council for Science actually approved this nomenclature of DNA sequences. So we have A, which is for adenine, and this is A represented by A. We have the cytosine, which is represented by C. Guanine is represented by G. Thymine is represented by T. Uracil is represented by U. Please, I want all of you to focus on the first part, the first five actually, only these five. Other part you don't need to focus. But let me explain you what actually it means. It means, when we send the sequences for the DNA sequencing, sometimes the machine is unable to recognize is it A, T, G, C, or U. So what happened? It gives you different segment. For example, it give you a yellow color signal. If you see on the right side, here, this is the results of the DNA sequencing when we get from the lab. So, Tapi, sometimes what happen, we don't get G, A, G, D, all these kind of results. Rather than instead of G, maybe we get W. So what W means? W means that it's a weak signal and it did not recognize properly. But actually, it means either it's a or either it's a T. Similarly, if it is S, it means it's C or G. So these are all of the things which are needed for the lab-based people more practically. But for you, please focus on these few parts, the first five. And remember, the whole idea is you must know that everything is coming from International Union of Pure and Applied Chemistry and International Council for Science. Okay, so we move on to the next part about the classification of nucleic acid. So it could be based on the number of strands, it could be based on the types of ribose sugar, it could be based on the location or based on the conformation. Now it's very easy for us because we already know about the DNA. After going through all these slides, the first classification is based on strands. So DNA can be double-stranded DNA, which is DNA, or single-stranded, which is ribose nucleic acid. So double-stranded is DNA, single-stranded is RNA. Number two classification is based on the type of ribose. If it is deoxyribose, it will be DNA. If it is ribose sugar, it will be RNA. Number three is the classification based on the location. Now we already know the first one is the nuclear DNA, in which we have the chromosomes. Number two is the mitochondrial DNA. Number three is the plastids and chloroplast DNA, like especially in the plants. Number four are the plasmids, which are the extracircular DNA, which are in bacteria. So we are not listing the synthetic and artificial DNA. This is one of the additional information, because now we can synthesize the genes and everything, all these sequences, especially inside the lab also. We are not going to make it a part of this list basically. Okay, now fourth one is a classification based on conformation. Conformation means the type, the way they are arranged, and the way they physiologically they are present in our body. So the first one is the A DNA, second is the B DNA, and the third one is the Z DNA. Okay, what is their importance in the body? This will be one of your assignment. But maximum one paragraph. I don't want you to spend so much time. So we have two assignments I will be uploading in the Caleb. So you just need to answer both of these answers. But I want you to read first. Don't just copy paste. Just read. I want you to get that knowledge first. Okay, so we have the A DNA, B, and Z DNA. Okay, now rather than believe that Watson and Crick made the DNA structure, I will rather stress that the structure made Watson and Crick. This person was very, very famous, and he came up with the structure of the DNA and how the DNA looks like. Okay, now properties of nucleic acid. The first thing is the keto-enol tautomerism. Number two is acid-base dissociation. Number three, strong absorbance of UV light. Very quickly, you might be needing number three in your practical somewhere. But and number one is good for the pharmacological importance. Number three is good for your body pH compensations. So there are three different functions. Okay, now the first one is we have the keto form. If you see here, we have the keto form and we have the enol form here. Keto forms you find here. This is one of the basically purines. You find keto form up there. O versus H. Happy on the right side, you from the enol form, you get OH. It's a very simple difference, but it counts a lot. It changed the whole structure, whole function of the nucleic acid basically. So we have the keto form and enol form of nucleic acids, and it's called tautomerism basically. Second thing is the optical absorbance of nucleotides. You have to remember the nucleotides are best absorbed or if you want to quantify that how much DNA any sample is having. So you will see at 260 nanometer, 260 to 280 nanometer basically. So it will give you the best. Normally we assume 280, but sometimes 260 also match very well, but it depends on the pH level. If the pH is you're having your DNA in any buffer which is high pH, then 260 is ideal. But if a low pH, then the ideal is 280 nanometer. It gives you a very good optimum concentration of the DNA, and you can see the results of the DNA quantification. Number three is the acid-base dissociation. RNA is resistant to dilute acids. DNA is depurinated by dilute acids. DNA is not susceptible to base. RNA is hydrolyzed by dilute acid. Remember, because they themselves are acids and they have a negative charge on them, so they are resistant to the weak or dilute acid. Just remember this part. So quantification nucleic acid. This is the formula basically to quantify the nucleic acid. So you take absorbance as 260 minus absorbance 320, and actually you don't need to go through all of it, but if you go through, it's good for you. At least you should have an idea what actually the DNA concentration is. So we have the semi quantification using electrophoresis. We have the quantification nucleic acid using spectrophotometer at UV 260 nanometer. So because we cannot use all the DNA is very crucial. We mix up with water. Example, we use 1 volume of DNA with 49 volume of water. So we'll put that dilution factor 49 here. Okay, and then we multiply by 50. This is just a formula, and then you will get the concentration of DNA. So quality of nucleic acid, quality in terms of concentration of nucleic acid and purity. Concentration can be checked by semi-quantitative method, the one we have just explained before. And the purity, this is the formula. You just add in all this formula. But what you have to do, you got your DNA in a test tube, and that DNA you measure the absorbance in the equipment at 260, then 320, and then 280, and then just use this formula and you'll get the values. If it is more than 1.5, it means that the DNA is very pure. It is not having any kind of RNA or any kind of protein inside. So you can use this DNA for the further analysis in the lab. But if it is not pure, it will be difficult. You'll not get the proper analysis in the lab later. So we have the type of RNA, we have the messenger RNA, tRNA, RNA, and many other types. So difference between RNA and DNA, we have already talked as a cytosine versus uracil. And the second thing we did talk about, we did not talk about this one, the thymine, which is 5-methyl uracil. So cytosine can deaminate to form uracil, but the repair system recognizes a normal uracil from mutated uracil. And how it happens, this is again a question for you. If you want, but it's not a CLA. If you want to read, you can read further. So what is the difference between DNA and RNA? Number two is, the first one was basically, we just said thymine and uracil. Number two is deoxyribose versus ribose. And the question is, DNA is more stable or RNA is more stable? The answer is the double stranded will be more stable. So DNA is more stable than RNA. So we have the DNA replication. This is our last part of our topic. So some of the things, maybe if you don't understand, please get back to me. I purposely actually add a lot of information here. You don't need to go to any other book, so that you can just go through and it is easy for you to read, go through easy. So this actually model is called semi-conservative type. It means, example, if we have two strands of DNA, again, the model of DNA replication in humans is called a semi-conservative type. What actually it means? It means that one strand of DNA will be conserved and it will not be involved in the replication at a certain time, but the other strand will be used to replicate the DNA to get another copy of the DNA. To get a copy of that DNA is called a replication. So that's why we call this a semi-conservative type of DNA replication. So there's these two-person Michelson shell experiments were performed, in which they have actually cleared how that DNA, this semi-conservative model works, and they make use of N14 and N15 isotope of nitrogen, in which N15 is because it's the radioactive isotope. So what they did, the first generation, if you see here, we are having the first generation here. In the first generation, they are exactly the same DNA. They just grow it like a normal DNA, and they find the absorbance. Later they add N15 to the culture to grow the DNA, and they found that all of the DNA actually take up basically the N15 into their strand, and it start giving a different color. After that, what they did, they grow it again back into the next generation. They grow it again back into the normal nitrogen 14, and they found that one of the strand is basically with N14, the other strand is with N15, which is because the semi-conservative model. So this is how actually they come up with the whole idea of a semi-conservative model, but later with more better technologies, it was proven with other technologies also. So rule for DNA base pairing is that A always pair with T and G always pair with C. We have already gone through this part. Okay, now the next part is the origin of replication. Whenever we have a DNA, I'll show you so that we can focus more easily. If you can see this specific picture, it's a kind of summary for the whole of this topic. If you see here, whenever we want a DNA to replicate, this is two strands of the DNA. The first thing is there is the origin of replication. So what happened at this origin? The DNA open up with a specific enzyme, and when the DNA got open up, because why we need this space? Because we need different enzymes to come and bind in this space. So once the enzymes come and bind in this space, then they start forming the next DNA sequence actually, or next DNA strand. So the first part is we have with this DNA is basically there are helicases which unwind a short region of DNA helix. Then we have the primase that initiate the synthesis of a short RNA segment, and then DNA polymerase enzyme basically synthesize the new strand of DNA. So now this is the synthesis happening here for the leading strand, and now this is how the whole DNA is formed, and it will give you two different strands. Make it very easy. The whole concept is you have origin of replication. Then once this is like a bubble, when this replication bubble is formed, then the different enzymes come and bind there, and they first using helicases. Helicases destroy the what we call the double bonding of the DNA strands. They may make them a little bit unwind them from the double strands, and so that different enzymes can bind, and that there is a space for different enzymes to come and bind there. And after that, all the other things will move on, and we get two different DNA strands. So what I want you all to focus, this whole thing is explained in detail starting from here. Origin of what is the origin of replication? So the DNA replication starts with the recognition of the site of origin of replication, that is the ORI. But this ORI in prokaryotes is called basically replicator region, and this because this region is having a specific sequence of the DNA which is called original replication element, ORE element. So in bacteria or prokaryotes is ORI, in eukaryotes is ORE. This area is recognized by specific proteins collectively called the original recognition complex, ORC. So means when the bubble is formed, actually it is also coming up with the ORC basically. So this ORC will move on to the next direction. So then we have the unwinding of DNA. This one I've explained you in that picture. So they are basically different topoisomerases are involved, gyrase and helicases involved in unwinding of the DNA. It's very easy if you can all listening to me. If it is very easy. What I want all of you after this class, please spend. It will take maximum 3 to 5 minutes. I want to read all of you to read this slide, next slide, and next slide. Maximum, I think in total 4 slides, I want all of you to go through. It will take maximum 3 to 4 minutes. So once you go through yourself, you will understand everything what I'm trying to tell you. So what the complex of enzyme proteins and other factors required for DNA replication is called replisome. So this replisome is basically is comprised of protein A or DNA. DNA bind a specific site. Then we have the how the supercoiling is finished by topoisomerases. Then we have the helicases. So this whole phenomena you have to go through, and then the last one, which is a single-stranded DNA binding protein SSB, to stabilize this whole complex. So I want all of you to just read these few slides at your own. If you have any problem, we will be repeating it again in the next class, only this part, because this is very important, but it is impossible for all of you to digest unless and until you read all this part yourself. Okay, now what happened for the leading strand? Now the concept is for the leading strand, it's very straightforward. You get the DNA polymerases. Okay, step number one, we got a bubble formation, or at the region of region response element or region of replication. This bubble formation will help in all the enzymes to come and bind. After they are bind there, then the DNA polymerase will bind and it will synthesize you a new strand. This is for the leading strand. What happened to the leading strand, the other strand? So what happened to the leading strand? There is an enzyme called primase synthesis, primase, which come and it give you a small sequence of the DNA. It will make a small sequence of the DNA, which is called a small sequence which is called RNA primer. It's like a single stranded sequence. It will synthesize, which this sequence will be complementary to the leading strand. This sequence will be the complementary, means if it is ATGC, it will be TACG. So then it will come and it will show you. It will come and it will bind here, for example. So the blue one is your leading stand, and this pink sequence is the one which is formed by primase. That is a small RNA sequence, and this is called primer. It comes and binds to your leading stand, and from there, if you see here, the DNA polymerase will come. This one is DNA polymerase, this box. So it will bind at this level, and then it is going to synthesize this whole strand. So this is how the leading stand is formed basically. So in prokaryotes, please try to understand here. In prokaryotes, this leading stand with this primer and its RNA and its primase is called Okazaki fragment, based on the name of the scientist. So this is called Okazaki fragment based on the name of the scientist. So in now these all different regions, for example, this is the first part, and similarly another second part is there. Later, after DNA polymerase, DNA ligase which ligate the DNA will come and they will ligate all these small parts together to form the leading stand. So this is how leading stand is different. Leading stand is a different mechanism. Leading stand, remember we said it's a small bubble is formed, then the helicase will come, then the topoisomerase will come, then the DNA polymerase will come. But in the leading stand, we have the primase, which will form a small RNA sequence, which is called primer. This primer bind to your what we call the leading stand. After that, we got the DNA polymerase, which could bind to this region and it will give you the whole sequence basically. So this is how the leading and leading strand differ from each other. Now, under the influence of DNA polymerase, the three group of the N nucleotide combines with the 5-phosphate group of the new deoxyribonucleotide. Okay, please, I'm leaving this part. This one I have already explained you in this previous slide. I just need all of you to just read yourself. I think you assume last 10 to 15 slides you have to actually read, but after this lecture, please, or maybe by today, at least read by today, so that if you have any questions, you can come back to me by tomorrow in the tomorrow class. Okay, so we have the polymerization. So when all the DNA, these strands, they join each other, this process is called polymerization. Okay, now this one, the Okazaki fragment, I've just explained you in the previous slide, but it is, some books say they're more specific to prokaryotes, not the eukaryotes, but for me, it's like a general term. Okay, now this is something very, very important. I want all of you to focus, and I think this will be our last topic for today. We have the telomere and telomerases. Remember, we just mentioned a few minutes back that the DNA is always replicate from 5 to 3 direction. Why? Because DNA polymerase always act from 5 to 3 prime direction. What actually it means? It means that when you have the DNA, if you see here, this is your leading stand, for example, and to this leading stand, this is the new stand which is forming. So what happens sometimes, the DNA polymerase enzyme is not able to synthesize the new strand in the 5' end of the new strand. So this is 5 to 3 prime, but on the other side, this is 3 to 5 prime, opposite side. So this region is sometimes is not formed by the DNA polymerase. It leaves the last 250 to 300 base pair unreplicated. They're not replicated. This is normal physiological process. It happens. So what happened to avoid this thing, that we also need this last part of the strand to be replicated? What happened? What God has provided us with? God has provided us with an enzyme which called telomerase. So this telomerase, just like we have the primase in the previous slide, this telomerase bring a RNA template which is opposite to this strand. If you see here is complement. So if you see here, you have a T versus A, T versus A, G versus C. So they're complement to each other. And this specific strand basically is used to basically synthesize the remaining part here with the DNA polymerase. Okay, so this is how this part at the end of the sequence will be basically replicated using telomerase enzyme. So now why it is very important and why we need to discuss about it. Something very interesting. You should know that our human chromosomes, we have the telomeric human chromosomes, and the corners, the edges of human chromosome with our life, they always start getting smaller and thicker. Example, a person who is 20 years old versus a person who is 40 years old, the thickening of the chromosome is more in 40 years old rather than the 20 years old. Why? Because of these telomeres and telomerases, what they're doing, because with every time when they are actually getting you a part of the DNA, so there is only single strand, and because it's only a single strand, it's not a double strand. It's a single strand. They're making a single strand. So every time when it is broken, sometimes a part of it, maybe you can say out of 50 times, maybe one time, a small part of DNA, maybe few sequences will be basically deleted, and it will basically not be present in the next sequence actually. You make it to make it very easy so you can digest. I'm trying to explain you in the easiest way. So what happened with all these kind of things, the stability of the chromosome is slowly getting lost, and maybe there is a chance when a small part is lost here, in the corner of the telomerase at this corner. So what actually is happening, maybe there is a very specific gene or very specific sequence here which is also lost, and which is involved in some very important physiological function. So this shortening of telomere end is prevented by an enzyme, telomere terminal transferase or telomerase. It contains an RNA component which provides a template for telomeric repeat synthesis. Okay, now how it become important for us clinically? Let us discuss that part. Why? Because in many of the cancer cells, when you're getting old, especially in the old age, the telomerase activity is lost. This activity decreases slowly. So when it is happening, for example, in cancer cells, they have the continued presence of telomerase and the chromosome length equilibrium is maintained. So, but in cancer cell, it is getting lost. And there's so many other diseases. For example, I've written it here for you to read, as cancer cells have increased and persistent activity of the telomerase, the cancer cells become immortal. Telomerase is also implicated in other human diseases like diabetes, aplastic anemia, Bloom syndrome, Fanconi's anemia, ataxia, telangiectasia, and Elizabeth Blackburn. There's so many diseases in which basically telomerase activity has been reported. So one of the best way, many of the doctors in different cancers and different genetic diseases, which I've explained you just now, they come up with a telomerase as a therapy. So telomerase is a therapeutic target for cancer chemotherapy also. So inhibition of telomerase can effectively control the multiplication of malignant cells. So this is something very important, because if you want, because these cells, they have uncontrolled multiplication. You stop the telomerase, they will stop. So remember, for this purpose, we can use even the RNA, which is basically we call the interference RNA technology. There's so many technologies coming in, but I'm sorry, because currently, with your capacity, I think it's too early to discuss all these things. So we will be, inshallah, I think, in other future lectures, we have all these things to discuss. Don't worry about it. So for the time being, just try to absorb that telomeres and telomerase are there. Telomere is basically the last part of the 5 to 3 prime end of our DNA sequence. And with age, the size of this sequence start getting reduced because of the activity of telomerase enzyme. Remember this part. But this activity in case of cancer cells sometimes becomes so enhanced, and because they're multiplying rapidly, it's uncontrolled multiplications. To stop them, we inhibit the telomerase by different mechanisms. So we're going to discuss those mechanisms some other lecture. But one of the easiest one for you to understand is we use antisense oligonucleotide against the RNA component of the telomerase. What actually it means, we use a specific RNA sequence, and example for here, we are going to just bind that sequence somewhere here to this sequence, and then it will basically stop. Or otherwise, Remember, this telomerase is bringing this RNA sequence here. So we will that our RNA sequence will bind somewhere here in the within the telomerase so that it cannot be activated. We stop its functioning. So this is one of the easiest way to block the telomerase besides some other medications. So this is about telomerase, and thank you so much. That is all about our lecture. Because I know you still have a free time now. Tapi, I will suggest all of you. Number one, you please read all those 4 to 5 slides I told you. Plus, if you have any questions, I am still here. Please ask me the question. You'll not ask the questions, you'll not learn. I know this topic is very appealing and is too much in actually clinically, and it's too much relevant in the future for all of you. So that's why it become more special, because in the future everything is about DNA, about personalized medicine. What is personalized medicine? Personalized medicine means, for example, one person is having, example, same sex, same age, same diet, everything is same. But example, that person, when you ask them to run together, they will be run in a different energy. One will be faster, one will be slow. The other thing example is, you give a Panadol to both of two of the people together. This medicine will act differently in one person and act differently in other person. Similarly, maybe example of someone is having obesity. Maybe one person is having obesity because of a different genetic makeup. Maybe the specific, maybe cholesterol is high or LDL is high. Maybe other person, another thing is very high. Maybe the obesity is not because of lipids. Maybe it's because of the carbohydrate metabolism. So what is actually personalized medicine? We talk about the genes and proteins and molecules, and we treat those genes and proteins and molecules at a personal level in these individuals, rather than just like any patient, like any patient, oh, I got a headache, you give them the medication. No, we give them a personalized medicine, personalized treatment. Now in the world, in all over the world, they're having their personalized genetic databases all over the world. In Malaysia, we have just started up in a part in USM under Human Variome Project. Tapi, this is still very new for very early for us to go to the personalized medicine at this level. We need maybe another 10 to 15 years. And I hope until by that time, you guys all will be specialized and you will be having and facing all this thing. So you should be very good in this topic basically. So tomorrow will be on our our topic will be more on transcription, translation. But this topic was a very kind of introduction. But what I want from all of you, only one thing. Yeah, I know you'll be very good in the exam questions and everything. Tapi, what I know, you please try to grab the knowledge that is more important for your future and for the patients. So whatever you don't understand, I please go through and just get only 10 to 15 minutes to read whatever I taught you, especially the last few slides where you really need a reading, inshallah. So that is all for me. And any questions, please, you're welcome. I'm waiting for your questions. Another 5 minutes will be waiting. Otherwise, we will actually close our session, inshallah. In case if somebody is not having any questions to ask, frankly speaking, you can leave if no questions. So, but if you have any questions, you can ask me even now, even you can ask me later, no problem, I will not mind. Even you can ask via WhatsApp, I'll not mind, inshallah. Unless and until you really want to learn.
Assalamualaikum, Prof.
Wa alaikum salam.
It's about the assignment. Can you explain more about that?
Okay, Nikki, basically, we planned actually two of the topics. I will just ask two questions under Caleb, or I will just even post also in the WhatsApp group. I need maximum maybe one half a paragraph. For example, we did discuss about the confirmation like this slide. We talk about what is the difference between A DNA, B DNA, Z DNA, and what is the importance in the body, for example. So you just read like what is the different example, which one is the major form in our body and why it is important in our body. Like maybe only 3 to 4 lines. Don't read. I just want you to grab the concept. That's all. Okay, few things are very important. Maybe we need another 1 to 2 lectures for them. But because we are not going through those parts here, looking at our learning outcomes, So we just need a basic concept. That's why some of the things I put as a small assignment. Similarly, there was another question I have added. I will inshallah post by today, inshallah. So that is another question which I want all of you to go through. I think there was something about yes. What are the two pathways by which nucleic acids are synthesized in our body? Remember, we talk about glycolysis, we talk about citric acid cycle. Or so, what about nucleic acid? How the nucleic acids are produced? What are the two pathways? I know because we are going to study them later in some other modules. At least you have a basic concept. What are the two pathways? Just name those two pathways. What are the two pathways? And if you can just read at your level, just read maybe for 5 to 10 minutes. That's all. Okay, Nageeb?
Okay, Prof. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions, please? I normally teach this topic in 2 hours basically when it's a traditional lecture, and it's more better, more enjoyable when you teach it at the whiteboard, with all the pictures and everything. But yeah, this is also a bit different for me. But I hope you try to grab everything. If you have any questions, please feel free. You can WhatsApp me. You can come and talk to me. I'll not mind. Inshallah, I will love to facilitate. So any of you who have no questions, so can still leave. I will not mind. If any questions, please you can ask the question. I'm still around.
Prof, another thing.
Yes, please.
Okay, when is the due for this assignment?
This will be not Nakib. This will not be involved in any kind of giving the marks or anything. This is only for the purpose for all of you to grab the knowledge. Okay, so you can post anytime. You can email to me using your through. They can email to me through you, or you can even just make a drive. You can share the drive with me. Everyone can upload there. I just want to see you guys have read or not. That even I will not mind if somebody will not submit, but what I want all of you to read about it.
So it means we have to form this one group and everyone have to send a paragraph for this assignment.
If you can send, that is ideal. So I can request to maybe the biochemistry people, maybe Prof. Ra, anyone. We can even include them in the continuous assessment also. We can request them.
Okay, Prof.
Okay, Nikki. Any other questions, please? Okay, my one question from me from all of you. Let's see who can reply. You can reply in the chat box. Okay, the question is, if for example there is an accident, and in that accident there was one boy and one girl died, and we cannot recognize their body. Okay, there was one boy and one girl who died in an accident, and we cannot recognize their body in that road accident. So we don't have their identity. We don't have anything with us. We just expect that maybe they belong to one specific family. So what will be an ideal test? It should be the maternity test or it should be the paternity test. Can you please reply in the chat box? It should be maternity or paternity, and which one is better? What do you think? Remember, we have the paternity, which is based on the genome or the all the chromosome DNA, and we have the maternity, which is based on the mitochondrial DNA. So, which test you will go for? Paternity test. Dehaja says paternity test. Okay. Any other answers? Paternity test. Okay. Okay. Now we have another question. This is how the genetics work. Okay. If, for example, we want to identify there is one small baby and the baby got mixed up in the hospital, for example, after the birth, after the delivery. So we want to see, it's a bit funny example, but just to creating a scenario, I'm asking you. So now if we want to see that this baby belongs to which parent, this baby belongs to which parent, so which test you're going for, paternity or maternity? Okay, now please listen to me. Maternity versus paternity. In the first scenario, we are not sure with which the accident happened. We are not sure how many people we are going to screen. we have to go for maybe 20 families, 30 families, 15 families. So in that first scenario, maternity will be more better because we are only focusing on the mitochondrial DNA. You increase the genome size. Remember, we have 46 pair of chromosome. You have to screen so much. You have to study so much. But if you screen only that small mitochondrial DNA, it will be a very small one. And in that case, example, we are assuming a boy coming to a specific family. We just need to pick the maternal uncles, maternal aunties. Why? Because all of them will be having the same mitochondrial DNA. You don't need to go to the father family. You can pick all the mother family and you can easily do all those kind of things. But in case of the baby, the option is bit different. Option Satu could be the maternity testing if the maternity testing kit is available. But we can also do the paternity testing in which you can match the example. You just want to match the papa, not the mama. Example, but this really happened. It's not like a joke, but it really happened. Example, a person come to you in a real life scenario. A person come to you and said that this baby is my son, but I am suspicious that it belongs to somebody else. It means maybe his wife is involved in somebody else. Example, that kind of example. So in that case, what test you're going for? We have no other option. You can only go for paternity. You cannot go for maternity at that time. So remember, the limitation and use of these tests are very important. You'll take the genome of the baba and you will align it with the genome of the baby. So you'll see they are matching or not, because he doesn't want to tell the mama that he tested or not. We have so many examples like that, please. It happened in the lifetime scenarios. So if you read the books, you read the articles, there are a lot of those kind of examples. So there is actually clinically you guys are coming in. Yes, specific diseases have specific tests and diagnosis available. Remember the advancement in technology is good and also bad. Sometimes you have no other option, especially in genetics. I give you more example. Example, you are told you pick a person and the person come to you and the person said, I want to see this son belong to me and no, not. Imagine you do the test, and the son really doesn't belong to that guy. Then what will happen to that family? Ever thought about that? So that kind of scenarios you have to keep in mind, because when you have to test as a professional. So the other things what are happening after that or before that, you really don't know. So those kind of limitations, sometimes you can just add in that you have done maternity, but it's okay. You can also do maternity. You can also take the mother sample. Similarly, last example, a female is having cystic fibrosis, for example. She's a carrier and she got miscarriage 2 or 3 times. So after 2 or 3 times, the fourth time the pregnancy is all normal. So in this specific case, you will take which sample? You will take the mitochondrial DNA to analyze, or you will take the genomic DNA to analyze? Mitochondrial or genomic? Of this mother and of this baby, both of them. Now we are not identifying. We are saying that this patient was a carrier of a disease. Means this person was having a gene. Now what we are going to do? Either we are going more towards a genetics, genomic DNA, or chromosomal DNA, or we are going towards mitochondrial DNA. Okay, now it's Cynthia. Okay, Cynthia, you replied me. City Hajar. Other people are also replying me. Okay. In that case, ideal is depending, because we already have different types of diseases. We have the mitochondrial diseases itself. So if you are sure as per sign and symptom that this is not a mitochondrial disease, this is a different disease, then you'll go to chromosomal DNA. So it's not like we just focus based on genetic knowledge. You have to line back with your clinical sign and symptoms also. Similarly, there is a disease called spinal muscular atrophy, in which the spinal cord, one of the interior horn of the spinal cord, called degenerative. So what kind of sample you are going to take? Answer is chromosomal DNA. So similarly, you have to be very sure what you are going to pick, but don't mix everything up. But remember, you are heading into a direction. We used to hear this thing of 15, 16 years back that we will be teaching, we are going towards DNA, but we never thought like the way we used to know, it become more advanced than that. So I think for you guys, you'll be treating surely genes and proteins. So make up your mind into that direction. When you talk about example, citric acid cycle or glycolysis, electron transport chain. So why not the diseases which are related to electron transport chain is not about that. Maybe it's not about the enzyme. Maybe the gene is mutated. The person is having a mutated gene. That's why not having the right enzyme. Or enzyme is there, but enzyme is not working because the gene is mutated. So you're going again to the chromosomal DNA now. Okay, so just trying to bring something to your mind. It's not that simple. It says you can use it for so many things if you become expert in that data in the future. So that is all for me. Last 1 minute. If any questions, otherwise we will inshallah stop the session. If you think you cannot ask me here, you can just also send the question in the chat box, even privately to me. I can reply you, no problem. Okay, if no more questions, you can leave the class, inshallah, and please have a nice time. And please read the last few slides I've told you to read. So, inshallah, we'll be meeting up tomorrow again in the morning for our next class, inshallah.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you, bro.
Thank you, Prof.
All of you are welcome.
Thank you, Prof.
Prof.
Okay, thank you so much.